okay, this is where you are, this is where you're going. And by the way, this is how you can improve. And maybe we can just hide behind the AI bot when we have to give them really bad news, right? It's just kind of hey, sorry, AI said it, it's not me,
but it's interesting because some of the best CSMs I know are the ones who can deliver that kind of feedback in a way that makes, the executive or the leader of that organization go, thank you. And once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Success Podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as I seek out and interview leaders and practitioners who are innovating and building great scaled CS programs. My goal is to share what I've learned and to bring you along with me for the ride so that you get the insights that you need to build and evolve your own digital CS program. If you'd like more info, want to get in touch or sign up for the latest updates, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. And if you have a question or commentary to be used in an upcoming episode, call us and leave a message at 512-222-7381. For now, let's get started. And welcome to the Digital Customer Success Podcast. It is episode 27. If you are new here, welcome. If you are a returning listener, I'm glad you're back. We have a great one in store for you today. I always love it when I get to speak with CS leaders within CS-focused companies. And today's a real treat because I'm speaking with Chris Dishman, who is VP of Global CS at Tatango, which, if you're not familiar, they're one of the originators of the CSP. I think Tatango and Gainsight are basically the two OGs. But Chris is a former Tatango customer turned employee. And so we have a great conversation today all about the kinds of things that the Tatango team are doing in customer success. We talk about AI, we talk about the elusive virtual or video or digital QBR. We talk about, ops and health scoring and all kinds of fun stuff. So super great conversation that I enjoyed with Chris Dishman, and I hope you do as well. Chris, I want to welcome you to the Digital Customer Success Podcast. It's awesome to have you here. I know it's been a couple of missed opportunities on my end and your end and all that kind of stuff, but we made it happen. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, good to be here. Good to be here.
Mm-hmm. You, I love your journey into where you are today because you have the classic kind of vendor to employee journey that you hear about sometimes, right? I think you were a Tatango customer for a few years, I believe, with On24, and then you decided to join the team. Can you enlighten us a little bit into that journey and how that happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at On24 for 18 years, which is, I think, about 6 or 7 lifetimes in SaaS. So
totally,
was there for a long time. And when I started there, I started as kind of a technical account manager, was running a team and managing support and, enablement, things like that. And then we got about 10 years into my time there, and we launched a new product that was a subscription SaaS product that was, really specific for marketing. And then we said, this is a good time for us to, customer success was just becoming, a thing at the time. And so we said, let's do this customer success thing. And so we started working on transitioning, all of our technical account managers, to customer success managers. Kind of went through the will and skill, process, as it were, and started shifting the team to that. And that was great. What's really interesting is, we kind of expanded and we were growing at a pretty good clip. And then this crazy 2020 pandemic hit. It's interesting because everybody was doing in-person events, marketing events, and this is a marketing tool. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, everybody was forced to sit at home and watch webinars. And so, our event volume and customer volume went absolutely through the roof. And that was, let's call it force acceleration into customer success, right? Into a scaled CS motion. And so, that really kind of stretched us a little bit, which was kind of fun. And then, after that, after going through an IPO with On24 and some success post-pandemic from there. Got an opportunity to jump in at Tatango and do a little customer success for customer success, which is super fun. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride for sure.
You are among a small but mighty band of CS leaders who do CS for CS platforms, which is cool.
Yeah. It's definitely fun. It's fun to be able to just talk with people like yourself and other professionals in the space and kind of get that you start realizing that, we're really literally all in the same boat. We're facing the same struggles, the same problems, different flavors of them, but at the end of the day, it's all about, really driving those customer adoption and getting value for our customers. And, what are the hurdles we need to clear in order to do that in a wacky environment that we're in right now. So
sure. Yeah. Wacky indeed.
For sure.
One of the things I wanted to kind of ask you about, and I think we'll get into specifics of Tatango a little bit because I'm very curious. But I do ask all of my guests basically the same question because everybody has a slightly different answer. But I'd really love to hear about your elevator pitch if you were to describe digital CS to a layman. In a few short sentences, what would you say to somebody?
Sure. I think when I have this conversation, which I do often, you have to start with the root of what customer success is, right? So let's start with defining that, which is, we need to be driving value for our customers in, the tool that we're using, right? Our software, our service, whatever. So as we think about, what scaled CS is, it's essentially doing that same thing. We're just doing it in a real efficient, motion that allows us to grow as a company without throwing, a boatload of resources at it. So how can we efficiently approach getting value to our customers?
I love it. Short and sweet, concise. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I first learned about Tatango, when was this? Maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I think it's been around that long, right? But I joined a company and a good friend of mine was just very smitten with the idea of, health scoring and the things that Tatango could do even back then in the infancy of I guess CSPs. But and I think things have obviously come a long way since then. I think there's an interesting vibe around health scores, in the CS community because I think a lot of people, I think there's a lot who have done them really well, but I think there's even more people who have not implemented them really well, and so it's not really super trusted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm getting at is, it's interesting where we've been. It's interesting where we are today, where health scoring is incredibly useful, and I would say, in some instances, the cornerstone of a good digital program. But where do you see that kind of going from where it is today, and what do you see in the future with regards to scoring? Yeah,
it is interesting. Being in the position I'm in, I do get to have this conversation with a lot of people, and health scores, at its core, it's something for an executive that's incredibly valuable, right? Like if I can say this customer is at 85 out of 100 in health score, and that's good. Okay, great. That makes me feel good, right? But like you said, do we trust that number? And, do we understand what's really driving that number? And even taking that a step further, are there aspects that are pulling that number down that I can leverage, whether it's a scaled program or, various enablement functions or CSMs to help improve that score, right? So, the thing that is interesting when you think about health score is, you have to, I think the core foundation of a health score is you have to understand what are the key things, that are making your customers healthy. I literally just got off a call 20 minutes ago with somebody from our board, and we were talking about, the sticky features and what is it that drives, somebody to continue to use and renew and grow in a product. And so you have to kind of, spend the time and the work to look at all of the data, in your, telemetry is whatever you have, to be able to understand, okay, why are people staying and why are people not staying, or growing and not growing. And that becomes kind of I'm going to say the cornerstone of your health score as it relates to, a factor. And then you start looking at all of the other elements. I mean, there's so many different things, and we know this from, we've seen customers, and I know we've all experienced customers that attrit, and the reason, and they work really well right up until the point when they leave us, and you go, right. Wait, this is a surprise. How did this happen?
Wait a minute, what?
Yeah, exactly. And so, so when you start looking at those, there's typically some underlying, signals somewhere, whether it be, sentiment or, different feature usage, like we said before. So, you understand the different elements of that health score, and then you start figuring out, okay, what's the importance, right? How do I weight that health score to really determine and understand, do I have a fair picture of my customer? And then truthfully, you have to look at that and you have to kind of, A/B test it, almost on a fairly regular basis. I think, one of the common mistakes I see customers have is they have a set it and forget it kind of mentality on their health score, and they use it across an entire, multiple segments. So your enterprise, your long tail customers, whatever. And now you end up with with something that kind of works and sort of accurate in most of this cases. And that's not something you can really rely on in action when you start thinking, as you mentioned, it's a key aspect of what we do in scaled CS. So, if I can't rely on that health score, well, then it's going to be sending wrong information to wrong people at the wrong time. And then that creates even a deeper problem. So,
yeah, it really does. We recently went through this exercise where we did some regression testing on churned accounts and really looked at the efficacy of certain metrics against those accounts. And it's, when you really start looking at it, it's always eye-opening kind of what you find in retrospect as to what your health score did well and what it didn't do well. And to your point, I think you're never done with scoring, because, you get maybe some new insights, you get new data, but also, some things go stale. And so it's important, I think, for an ops function to keep it fresh.
Absolutely. And that's something that, again, as you, and we kind of constantly talk about iteration. It's one of the things that at Tatango we're really keen on, and it's important from a CSP product, to be able to do that and measure, like you said, is it effective or not? Where is it working or not? And then, okay, well, let me make an adjustment. And then once I make that adjustment, let me, kind of A/B test it and find out, no, this is actually more accurate. Great, let's go with A instead of B, so there's the kind of constant, it's, we've always said at Tatango, it's view the customer journey as a product. And when you think about a product, you launch it, you review what's going on with it, and then you iterate, and then you launch it again, and then you test it. And then it's just like this kind of constant flywheel effect. Right. And so, we have to think about health score, customer journey, all of those things in that same way, that it is definitely not a set it and forget it. It's something that you have to kind of continually look at and work and evolve, in order to kind of keep up with the way things are going. So.
Yeah. And to your point earlier too, it's like, you need to come to it, from the standpoint of what goal are you trying to accomplish,
Right.
Because I think the tendency for a lot of folks is just, oh, that's cool, we can measure that, let's throw it into the health score. That may or may not be effective, because you may want your health score to be like, a really functional tool for your teams to go diagnose things, or you may want your health score to be as predictive as possible, or a combination of both, and those kinds of things. So it's always interesting. And I guess what the question I'm getting to here is, there are several frameworks famously out there. There's DEER. I know Jeff Beaumont has a lot of documentation around Prove, which is another kind of framework. Does Tatango, or do you, lean on a specific framework? How do you advise your customers to start really thinking about structuring their scoring?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that there's a specific, framework other than it's, because there's I mean, we're working in so many different verticals and so many different companies, and you know, in my mind, to try to force somebody into a given, you know, I don't know, process or whatever is
Sure.
might be a bit tricky. But, you know, again, if you kind of really boil it down, it's like, okay, what are the factors, you know, that you have looked at and understand are differentiators, that are going to cause people to stay and or to leave. And then once you understand that, then you say, okay, well, how important are each one of those things? I mean, let's kind of scale rank them. And then you know, report on it, and then you can look at it and regression test it and see, you know, is it proving out right or not? And then you fine tune and adjust. So, you know, truthfully, it's pretty basic. It's like, you know, I think we all kind of generally know what is the differentiator of your, you know, product or service, you know, and then once you start with that, are people using that or not? And if they're not, then you probably got some people at risk, right? So that's where you have to kind of go and start doing some of the work behind the scenes. So
yeah, for sure. Cool. You know, I think you see your fair share of implementations, you know, of Tatango. I'm sure you see your fair share of issues that customers run into, and, you know, everything along the way. And I'm curious if you have, over the last, you know, little while, have built up a learning for yourself of, you know, what makes a successful CSP implementation. And at what point do you feel a customer is ready? Because I can tell you right off the bat, there's a lot of people who have no business implementing a CSP until they kind of clean up their data a little bit, or whatever that may be, or maybe they're just not big enough yet. Like, have you taken away some learnings or some patterns that you see among folks wanting to get into a CSP?
yeah, I mean, you know, it is interesting. There's when I first launched the CSP, you know, Tatango at On24, which was in 2017 ish, that area. It was interesting because, you know, at the time, really, Tatango and Gainsight were the only two shops in town, right? And
for sure,
you know, since then, now there's a bunch of other ones that you know are certainly decent. And it is interesting as you look at, you know, a maturity of an organization and whether or not and what time, you know, they should consider jumping into a CSP. I have seen a lot of, I'm going to say, very immature customer success organizations that come in that, you know, want to sign up and, you know, get access to Tatango, and, you know, 12 months in, they're like, yeah, I mean, I'm a team of one, you know, I don't have time to do this. And, you know, if they've got a small enough quantity of accounts, I mean, track it on a spreadsheet, you know, I mean, it's, you know, I hate to say that out loud, but I mean, there are certain scenarios where you go, okay, you know, use the tools that are available to you. But, you know, it is interesting when you start thinking about customers that have you know, you mentioned data, and that's always the sticky widget, right? Because everybody's connected to Salesforce in some way, shape, or form, most likely. And Salesforce is generally messy for most people. You know, so as you start thinking about that, you go, okay, well, if I'm going to wait until data is clean, to launch a CSP, then you're probably never going to launch a CSP. You know, I was having a conversation with one of my CSMs, yesterday, and we were talking about this very thing. And she was telling me that, you know, this particular customer of hers has a couple of different data sources that they're pulling into Tatango, and they're actually using Tatango as a source of truth to clean up the data from the other sources, right? So, and you know, you can certainly do that because, you know, as we all know, manipulating things in Salesforce is you know, very next to impossible. So to leverage a CSP from that standpoint to get a little bit better source of truth, and then, you know, once you do that, now you can start driving those actions. So, you know, back to your original question, it's like, you know, when is it right? Well, when you're ready to start, and I'm going to, you know, say scale your organization, your structure that drives additional consistency across how you service your customers, you know, and efficiency and how you can work with, you know, your customers as well. And so that might be your long tail customers. but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, and I've listened to some of your other, podcasts. You've got some great guests on here. And I mean, it's interesting because, scaled CS is not just for your tiny, long tail customers. I mean, it is definitely something that we as a customer success professionals have to deploy across every segment. It's critical. Just to me, it helps really drive a level of consistency too, for your teams and for your customers. So, I think the key thing about getting into a CSP is just when you're ready to kind of level up that, like I said, the consistency and the efficiency of your practice. So,
yeah, makes sense. I also feel strongly that there is a staffing component to doing that as well, and kind of an operational rigor around it, because it's one thing to implement it, but then there's the maintenance of it, and the maybe less the maintenance, but the attention to it.
right.
I think you need somebody, whether it's a part of somebody's role, whether it sits in an operations role, whether it's a bespoke kind of, person to, kind of own the tooling, the inputs, the outputs, the flows, the strategy around the tool, the strategy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I launched Tatango on 24, I was that person as the VP of CS.
Sure.
We didn't have a CS ops role, and I was like, okay, this is a tool that is that was quick enough to stand up. I mean, we actually from an implementation standpoint, we got Tatango launched inside of 1 week. I was getting value.
Holy cow!
Wow. Yeah, no kidding. And it just from an ease of use and an ease of implementation standpoint, it was pretty amazing. And once we got, everything set up and implemented, the next step was, okay, so, how are we going to leverage this thing? And I was the one on point, and it was easy enough, with the way the tool is laid out to be able to go in and build out some flows and create some campaigns and, start small and work our way into it. And then, over time, as we continue to grow, we got a CS ops team and somebody there that really knows what they're doing. And I even had, different people, different CSMs at time that would step in and kind of run different functions or initiatives within the tool as well. So, we're able to really kind of spread things out, which, it is important from an ease of use standpoint of the tool itself, and kind of allows for us to be able to execute, again, at scale across that, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, it's always great to give important. Folks a chance to grow like professionally by just like giving them maybe some side projects that align to their interests, but also, makes the org better and gets them to learn a little bit more about the tool and stuff. I love doing stuff like that. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And kind of speaking of which, on the same vein, I wanted to touch on something that you talked about earlier, where you were having a conversation with, your CSM around certain things. And I would imagine that being a CSM for a CSP adds a layer of challenge because, again, you're seen as a subject matter expert on how to use the tool, obviously, but then also how to run certain things. Do you guys get inundated with requests for like, well, how are you managing your customers, in Tatango? Like, let me see your workflow. Let me see what it looks like for you. Does that happen a lot? And I'm sure there's privacy concerns there too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that is so great about the CSM team at Tatango. I mean, we've got, experts in the space that, are dealing with, customer success leaders in the space on a regular basis. And so they have a unique perspective around, how to execute using our tool, of course, but also just generally speaking in the space. We have our enablement team, and shout out to Kristen Listen. She's simply fantastic, and has built out, a number of things within, we call it Creator Campus. It's our kind of LMS for Tatango. And she's been doing a lot of different things around really helping enable our customers. But, kind of pulling it back to scaled, we do a lot of, we do, we call it Success Squad. It's like a genius bar,
Yeah.
for, for our customers. And so people can sign up, and we'll have a CSM sitting there, and they actually go and, spend a 30-minute session with a customer, even though they're not assigned to them, and they can answer questions and provide some of those best practices and things like that. And we do the same thing with our customer success engineering team. So if somebody has integration questions and things like that, they can do that. And of course we do the, one-to-many sessions like webinars and office hours. And I mean, all of those, all the good, scale techniques, we certainly are deploying those as well. But,
Sure.
But it is fun to be able to leverage the learnings from, the smart people that we have on our customer success management team to be able to really, help our customers get the value that they need, out of the tool, so that way they can do the same thing for their customers. So it is something we hear quite a bit.
Share those best practices. Yeah,
absolutely.
You just mentioned you do, a lot of one-to-many things in the office hours and things like that, which I think are, phenomenal best practices, for especially office hours. They're so light touch. Like you just, and you let your customers essentially create the content for you, which is amazing. But are there some specific digital motions that you've implemented that either you're particularly fond of, proud of, have been particularly successful, or have been massive failures that you've learned a bunch from?
Yeah. I mean, we do all of the kind of typical, we're running various, campaigns, and, I hesitate to use the word tech touch because it's so overblown, but you know what I mean? So we do a lot of things where, we evaluate various kind of functions, what people are doing. So, some of those things are obviously time-based. Some of those are function-based. So they did this thing. Let's make sure that we enable them on this next thing. Or, as we think about, again, some of the features that we know are helpful to people and that keep them, retained from that standpoint. We'll drive additional things around, pushing people to be, enabled on those. And so, a lot of that, it's kind of combination between, campaigns and then leveraging, some of the enablement functions that we have, and then, pulling in, CSMs where we need to in those scenarios. But, other than that, we do, I like to think about some of our, business reviews are a little bit dead. I think, I don't know. It's almost like a bad word these days talking about,
really
quarterly
is.
Business reviews. It really is. It's interesting. But, I've kind of started pushing the team on really, call them value reviews, right? Or it's a value touch point. I mean, we know our customers looking to, we know they're looking to get something out of the tool. So the question becomes, what is that? And let's make sure that we've got that clearly defined, the objective tracking and management, and then, how are you doing towards that? And that's really, it's interesting. If you look at anything from Greg Danes, is so great, and he's got so much incredible data. And I mean, he's got one of his quotes was, anything that improves customer results reduces churn. I'm like, well, that's pretty straightforward.
Absolutely.
Very Greg Danes like, but, but, I mean, if we're, anything that we're doing, from that standpoint, and again, doing that at scale to improve what they're doing and the results that they're getting out of your product is really kind of the point, right? So understanding, what are the key objectives, what's the value that they're wanting to get out of the tool, and then, and then moving that forward with them, and really kind of plotting a path for them through their journey to get to that point, making sure that they're aware of where they are in that process is pretty key. So,
yeah, to your point, I love Greg Danes. He and I were having a conversation for an episode, and one of the things I told him, though, is that I really appreciated probably an unexpected area of his website, which was the whole list of quotes that he's put out. Like, it's just a massive page of just all of his little quirks and quotes that he puts out, which is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a big fan. One thing that you mentioned that I'm a huge fan of is that intersection between the digital motion and the human, where you've got a digital motion because it automates something, it creates alerting, whatever it is. But then I think the thing that really makes those things hyper effective is knowing exactly when and how a human should get involved in that situation, to really drive those outcomes. And you hit the nail on the head, right? We just want to drive outcomes. Everything else falls into place if you drive those outcomes.
Absolutely. Well, and it is interesting when you're thinking about, creating a journey, right? And a customer journey for, especially when you're thinking about it in the context of a digital CS motion. It is not humanless. It's just not going to be humanless. It's not. And
can't be.
So the question becomes, okay, as you're if you're thinking of it as a linear journey, although there's no such thing, but
right.
If it were a linear
like a subway
journey,
map,
exactly, more like a spider web.
Right.
But as you're kind of moving through that, it's like, okay, at some point, you're going to have a period where there's an off ramp, as it were, to engage with a human, right? To engage with a person. The question is, how can we formulate that journey such that we minimize those off ramps? And so we really kind of focus on the moments that matter and those strategic kind of intersections with where a CSM is needing to step in and answer a question, and kind of formulating that journey is something that, it takes time and you're not going to get it right the first time, but it is something that, that as you start really kind of working through it, you can really kind of get some strong value out of that. So, it's pretty cool.
It can be kind of elusive at times.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, and so, Allie Irvin with Extreme Networks, and she's one of our customers, and she's got a great scaled CS motion, and she had a quote recently on some Tatango Live event that we had, and she said, scaled CS, isn't an all or nothing, right? So it's interesting when you think about how, as you're mapping out what your scaled CS or digital CS motion is, it's like, okay, it isn't all or nothing. You can have different variations and flavors of that. And if you're going into it thinking that it's a humanless experience, then you're probably going to have a whole lot of retention problems on your long tail customers, right? So you got to figure out what are those off ramps, what are those moments that matter as you're building out that journey, and then kind of extrapolate from there.
Yeah. I think there's also an expectation that people feel like there's a playbook, and in some extent there are options, but it depends so highly on, in fact, I posted on LinkedIn not long ago about the fact that I strongly believe that like digital CS is probably the function that has the most amount of variables of any function, just because you're working cross-functionally with other departments. You're working, your customer is not just the customer, but it's also your internal audience, your CSMs and your support teams and all that kind of stuff. You've got data coming from all different kinds of places. You've got, in product and email, and like, it just becomes like, overwhelming. And I think the trick is not necessarily to follow the playbook. It is to, come up with your best options based on your surroundings and what you have.
Absolutely. And it is interesting too, because we tend to get wrapped around the axle on things like, okay, well, what does this look like and how is it going to impact things? But at the end of the day, as we were talking about earlier, it's all about, the customer outcomes, right? We have to continually keep that as our North Star and say, okay, the goal here is to make sure that the customer is successful using your product. And so if that is the North Star, working with marketing, working with, with your product team and making sure that you understand, okay, this is kind of the thing that is really helpful to people. Let's double down on this. Let's make sure that we're continuing to evolve that aspect of the product. Let's, put additional time, effort, energy behind that, And you mentioned, marketing, there's a partnership with marketing, especially when you start getting into, driving digital campaigns, that we have to be, in complete lockstep with our marketing team. They know better than anybody, how to develop the content that's going to, scratch the itch for your customer. So making
Right.
sure that you're doing that, and not creating, fluffy marketing campaigns, but something that really helps people understand and get the message they need as quickly as they need to, which is pretty key. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a very maybe underappreciated is the wrong word, but like acknowledged aspect of digital CS is that interplay between, your marketing organization and all the great things that they do, versus what you want to go do, the product organization and the in-product stuff, and what you want to go do. Like a big part of it is just relationship building and strategery.
Is that a word? Strategery?
Sure is. It is now.
It is now, isn't it, Alex? Okay, it's from the Alex Dictionary, right? Strategery.
Right.
Perfect. That's funny.
And speaking of, earlier we kind of joked about the fact that the QBR has kind of like become a bit of a dirty word, but I think one of the things that's elusive is this whole notion of a virtual QBR, or kind of a self-serve QBR. And I know that you all have made some pretty great strides recently, just in terms of being able to offer kind of like, I think it's like a video QBR type, status sharing type functionality, which I think is so super cool. But I still think that there's a long way to go in that, and maybe generative AI can help us with that. But given that you're kind of on the forefront of this whole thing, what in your eyes is kind of the future of this whole notion of a virtual check-in or a virtual QBR, and what's a meaningful way of implementing those things?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think whether it's a video business review or something that, and I mean, truthfully,
VBR.
That is,
I like it.
Yeah, VBR. Yeah. I mean, the thing that's interesting about that is it's literally just something that kind of automatically puts something, the data that you're pulling out of the system into, a consumable format that's a little interesting to watch, right? It kind of summarizes it. And what's really, when you think about any kind of a scaled approach to giving somebody a status update of their attainment towards an objective, that's really what you're looking at, right? And so, you mentioned AI. It's like, okay, so if you said, hey, your objectives are X, Y, and Z, this is where you are on the path to getting to X, Y, Z. Here are the next steps, and here's kind of a summary. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of AI 101, really, if we want to, as it is now. And so to be able to deliver that in a very succinct format, whether that's through a VBR or even just through a standard email or an in-app, touch point that says, by the way, this is where you are, this is where you're going, you're doing great, keep up the good work. I mean, it's kind of like that. And these things have been around for a while. And certain people do them really well. Like if you're, I've gotten, from marketing automation tools where it's like, hey, here kind of your high level data points. Here's how the open rates are happening. You're doing a great job on your content. Looks like last month you dipped. This month you're up again, and you kind of go, okay, it's just a real positive sense of, you are tracking where you want to go. Right. And I think that's, that is something that we can do at scale when you have, all of the data in one location, as we do in CSPs, and then it's like, okay, well, now I can take that and kind of action it and drive additional adoption and views of that content, and kind of keep the momentum going with your customer about what they're doing well. I do think as customer success managers, we often, we don't want to talk about what they're not doing well. Right. Nobody wants to be, confrontational. And so, but it's so critical to say, hey, listen, you're doing this well, but, here are the things that you need to improve on. That's what, we all really want to know that, and so that really helps to improve, ultimately how we guide them in that journey to getting the value out of our products. So, I think that's pretty key. So,
and ultimately, that's a very human thing. Like, I think to do that effectively, I think not only do you need to know your personas and what information is appropriate to the persona, you're not going to talk to an admin the same way that you would talk to your
right,
executive buyer, right? But then there's also that emotional intelligence involved of recognizing how certain people like feedback and what
right.
resonates and what doesn't resonate. And that's a
100%.
little harder to do digitally.
Yes, it is. There is definitely a skill set there. And, what is also interesting is, as we think about it, from a digital standpoint, you can give them the data, and even some of the insights. And, and like I said, I think that's a good foundational place for AI. And as we, I think we're all kind of, dipping our toes in what that looks like and how is it, it's going to be AI plus humans. I'm, I just am convinced, and that's kind of our view on things from Tatango's perspective. And so it's like, okay, well, how can I take the data that I'm getting, aggregate that, and get some insights on it from an AI standpoint, and position that in such a way to my customer that lets them understand, okay, this is where you are, this is where you're going. And by the way, this is how you can improve. And maybe we can just hide behind the AI bot when we have to give them really bad news, right? It's just kind of hey, sorry, AI said it, it's not me,
but it's interesting because some of the best CSMs I know are the ones who can deliver that kind of feedback in a way that makes the executive or the leader of that organization go, thank you for giving me that. It's like an extension of the team, but that all comes into like building trust and building rapport and doing all that kind of stuff. And so in my view, and I'd love to know if you kind of agree or if you have a different opinion of this, it's not necessarily that we will always rely on digital motions to do that. I think AI is one thing, and but there's always is going to need to be some human to human interaction. But I think where digital and scaled motions really come into play is that rapport building, that trust building, because at the end of the day, you want your digital motions not to be seen as digital motions, but to be seen as like the extension of the human. Like I want my CSMs to take credit for all that kind of stuff. I don't want credit for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, as I said before, I think that if you're thinking of, a journey, I'll go back to my linear journey that doesn't exist. But if you're thinking of that journey, if you can build the foundation of that through that digital motion, but you've got your CSMs kind of layered on top of that to be able to pick up those, those off ramps, those moments that matter, those kind of strategic touch points, then that in and of itself drives some scale, because you're creating a level of consistency, and you're doing the things, we're helping the CSMs by, offloading some stuff that quite frankly, we can program. So let's program it. And, and that helps them from an efficiency standpoint. It helps from the customer from a consistency standpoint. And then it also, is, it's going to ultimately drive, the customer to those outcomes that we're really looking for. So,
couldn't have said it better. As we kind of start to wrap up, because we've spent a lot of time already, and I just looked up in the clock. I was like, holy cow.
That's good. That's good.
One of the things I always love to get from my guests, and I've actually started compiling on the website. So there's a resources section, so everybody's kind of links and all that kind of fun stuff is listed there. But I'd love to know what's in your content diet. What are you paying attention to keep fresh and all of that stuff?
Yeah. I like to say I get a steady dose of McKinsey articles delivered to my email inbox every day. So I get a lot of those. There's just tons of great information, not just within customer success, but just generally speaking. So
the question is, do you actually read them, or do they just kind of like stay there unread? Because that's me. I do not. I don't read all of them, but I'll kind of peruse through, and when I see something that catches my eye, typically it's something AI or whatever, I'll certainly dive in and dig into those as that's a good one.
As I have time. Yeah. So, and I recently finished the Effortless Experience, which is, I would say, not an exciting read. Certainly, you know, not a good beach read, I would say. But there's a lot of
So there was effort in finishing it.
Yes, it was not an effortless experience, but it does have some really good data.
Cool.
And then podcast. I don't know if you've listened to Decoder, but it's a great podcast. So, you know, just good insight, you know, from executives and various people in the space, you know, technology space. So that's always a good one. So
that's cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great list. Next question is, you've already given some shout outs to a couple people as we've been discussing, but is there anyone who is excelling digitally that you would want to call out?
Well, I'd have to say Tatango, you know, but can I pat my team on the back? You know, I mean, we obviously using our product and really kind of driving that, we have to be good at it in order to be able to encourage other people to be good at it, right? So we're in a unique space there. So that's something that our team and our ops team has been doing really well, onboarding team, et cetera. So, and then, you know, the other one I mentioned earlier was Extreme Networks. Allie Irvin, you know, she does some great stuff on a scaled CS approach and, you know, how they're executing their problems or program rather. So, so, I mean, those would be the two that I would give shout outs to. So
that's great. That's great. Well, I thank you for your time. Where can people find you, reach out to you, engage with you, and keep up with you? Yeah,
absolutely. LinkedIn is certainly the best place. Would love to chat with anybody about this. It's one of the things that I do love about my job is that I get to have these conversations on a regular basis with people and kind of find out what they're doing and how they're achieving their outcomes, and, you know, what are they doing different, or, you know, what are they seeing different in the space. And so would love to have a chat. So reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can find time to talk.
Sounds good. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time together, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day and your Friday. Hopefully it's you're not too far away from the weekend.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the time, and thanks for reaching out. It's definitely been a fun conversation, so I appreciate it, Alex.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Customer Success Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps us to grow and to provide value to a broader audience. You can view the Digital Customer Success definition word map and get more details about the show at digitalcustomersuccess.com. My name is Alex Turkovich. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time.